What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we're going to try to get this pretty much buttoned up as far as the engine goes on Homer. So let me flip you around. We'll do our usual. We'll show you where Homer currently stands today, and then I'll show you what I'm going to work on. This is Buster Radio Garage. All right, cool. So this is where Homer currently stands. Pretty much buttoned up here. And if you notice, now we have a blower harness on here. And I'll explain that to you here in a second. But essentially, everything here is bolted down and finished. The only thing we've really got left to do is run the fuel lines, get those done. We're going to put in new plugs, obviously, the wires. And then the linkage is what I'm going to work on today. So as you can see here, got this linkage kit from AED all installed. Actually a really simple system. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these before. But my problem is here's the end of my linkage. And all the way down here is my linkage cable. So I've got this roughly 1.5 feet worth of real estate where I have nothing to go there. So where did that go? Let me find it. I've laid something down, for crying out loud. All right, cool. So most of these, I think if not all of them, are modeled after a big block Chevy. And here is the bracket that you would generally bolt down here on the intake, like way down in here. Well, that's obviously not going to work for me. I can't bolt it to the blower. So the only thing I can do is one of two things. Is to spend roughly $200 on a universal bracket that goes there that is also modeled after a big block Chevy that I would also have to modify, or I can make my own bracket. Now, that any of you have ever been here more than 5 minutes know that that's going to start out with a piece of cardboard, right? So that's what I plan on doing. I'll show you. It has to sit roughly like so. Kind of like probably a 30-degree angle. So my intentions are to create a bracket that's going to bolt here, come out about to where this is setting, then take and bolt this to that bracket, and then use it as it's intended, right? So I probably shouldn't have put this header on because it's going to be like right in the way now. I may even take it back off. Not really for sure, but on this episode, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a one-off bracket to fit this blower. Here's my piece of cardboard I'm going to start with, and then I've got this piece of steel I had laying around. So I'm going to get this modeled up, cut, and get ready to make my bracket out of that. All right, I want to touch base on some of the safety stuff. I know some of you have seen it on the community post. Pretty supportive over it, which I agree 100%. But there was some conversation regarding safety at the upcoming events, especially with blower cars, regarding having harnesses and transmission having blankets. Now, I had no intention whatsoever of doing either one of those two things, mainly because I'm cheap, didn't want to spend $1,000, $1,100, whatever it was on there. I figured I'd just let it run. And if Homer blows up, then I don't care. You guys know that. The cars blow up, like Linda over there. You know, I blew her up on purpose last year just to do it for the fans. Didn't really care. But I got to keep in mind of the spectators as well, right? So if this thing goes shooting off 10, 12 foot in the air and hits somebody, or, you know, that's a bad deal. I don't want anybody getting hurt at a show. So we just went ahead and did it. So we got a hold of Stroud. Got us a Stroud blower harness. Got us a Shroud transmission blanket, and I'm also going to beef up the tunnel on Homer as well, which isn't going to be that big a deal because there's nothing in here. So just kind of like a brief description why I tore everything back off here and done that. And another reason I didn't film it was for that, right? Because I had to take all this back off to get that on. This actually had to be modified a little bit to fit, because for some reason, and I get it, everything is modeled to fit a big block Chevy. You know, Mopar, like every piece of this blower setup, everything that I put on this car that wasn't like direct buy from Edelbrock or something had to be modified in one shape, form, or the other. So you know, it is what it is. So let's get to making this bracket. Let's get all this linkage hooked up, and then we're gonna get started on running these fuel lines. We want A&N everything. We want quick connect from A&N fittings, which I've never used, but I'm hoping it's gonna save me some time. And then hopefully we'll get the transmission put in, torque converter, drive shaft, get that rear end checked, and then maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to drive Homer around next week. So let's get after it. All right, guys, I got my cardboard trimmed down to a more like realistic estimate of what I'm gonna need. So here's kind of what we got going on. So this is the exact width of that piece of steel that we have over here, and I think I'm gonna need all this. I'll probably round it off and put some designs in it to make it look cool, but anyway, so essentially we've got to make provisions for these 2 bolts. And we have roughly 1/8 of an inch on this side, on the back side of this bolt and the back side of this bolt. So essentially we just got to get this cardboard worked down to where it's gonna work in there. I may even pull these studs back out, which is kind of risky, to be honest with you, because everything is good and tight here. So I may try it with them in there and then work from there. But what I'm gonna do is start working this bolt first and getting this trimmed up. And then we'll get this one worked and see if we can actually get this cardboard to fit over top of these bolts where it needs to be. Because, I mean, another thing you got to keep in mind is this, you know, has no rigidity to it. It's going to do whatever it wants. The steel is going to be way more unforgiving. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and start getting this worked in. All right, guys, I found the perfect plug here that I'm going to use for the template for the bolt holes around the blower. Let me show you. This is actually, I believe, an old crush plug off an oil pan. And to be honest with you, it is a perfect fit for the blower. So I stick it in here. Boom. It's the exact size of that hole and the exact size to go around that bolt. So without breaking it, this actually fits both. So when I start my template, this is what I'm going to use to mock up my hole and the steel to fit within that blower section. So let's get to tracing this out. Like I've said before, kind of like when you were in school, right? You trace something out and then cut it out. So let's get this done real quick. All right, guys, I got you set up on my workbench. Today's flavor holding up my phone is a couple of flat discs. So anyway, so we know the old crush washer is the exact circumference for the blower, the exact circumference for the bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace this out, take it about 1/8 of an inch past the washer to allow for any cast imperfections in the blower, so on and so forth. And then we'll do the same thing here. Make sure we get this cut how we want after the holes are ready. Get it out onto the steel and then just start massaging it, right? Getting it where we want it, how we want to design it, if we want to put any whatever in it. And then we'll mock it up and see what it looks like, so on and so forth. So let me get this traced out. Just going to use a Sharpie here. Make sure we get this where we want it. Now again, this is just cardboard, so we're not out anything if something, God forbid, happens. All right, cool. Now, to be honest with you, when I go to punch the holes in here, that's going to be kind of a difficult thing because it's only going to leave an 1/8 of an inch piece of steel left, which is more than enough once it's bolted down. But like if you're off just a hair in your drill bit, I mean, it's over. You're starting over because you have no more room to go anywhere, right? So there's the first hole. I'm going to go over and mark where my second hole needs to be. We'll get a straight edge on here, mark it 1/8 of an inch over, mark out what we want to keep, mark out what we want to get rid of, and then we'll go from there. So let's see what happens. I'll be back with you in a minute. All right, guys, so here's kind of like a rough idea of what I need. Almost looks like a set of headlights. I ought to put a J there to make it say Jeep. But anyway, so essentially, I'm going to trim these corners off from around these outer edges of these circles that are going to go in the blower. Cut this corner off and get rid of it. So then essentially, these are going to go in the bolt holes, but I'm going to have a hard time because the blower is going to be in the way here, right? Well, we got to go back to this bracket. So this bracket is got to sit underneath here to catch the linkage, but it's got to sit up and down. So you see the bracket itself's got to sit at an angle, right? See what I'm talking about? So this is straight, the linkage is straight, but the bracket itself still sitting at an angle. So what I'm gonna do is once I get these holes to line up with the bolts and they'll sit in there, this is gonna go on the steel. And what I'll do is I'll cut it on the steel to where this section, let me turn this around, essentially where this section is gonna tilt up, right? It'll clear the blower, but it's also gonna act as a provision for this to sit on and tilt up to where this will stand straight and catch the linkage. See what I'm saying? And then we'll get everything cleaned up, test fit it. If this works okay like I think it's going to, then we'll have one complete solid bracket that bolts to the blower that also holds the linkage, and it'll fit just like it belongs there. Now whether we keep, you know, all this extra meat back here, I don't know. We'll figure it out. I've also got to put a provision in here somewhere to attach my original linkage cable to hold it in place so the linkage will function. So anyway, let me get this cardboard trimmed up. We will drill these holes just as if it's the steel so we can get them perfect. And we'll test fit this all going. All right, guys, I get everything trimmed out here that I feel that I won't need. And I'm starting to drill the holes for the eyes, or for the bolts rather. So I've got this one drilled out, and what I've done is just kind of took a couple screws and put this on an old 4x4 I had at the shop, or just, you know, a tire chalk, whatever you want to call it. Anyhow, so I'm treating this just as if it's the steel. So I'm drilling this out with the same bit that I'm going to do the steel with. And we are just going to punch these out and get this lined up. Doing this and holding the... Now keep in mind, this is just cardboard, right? So if I screw this up, I'm just out the cardboard, no big deal. You do this with a couple pieces of metal, and then you're starting to get into, you know, quite a bit of money, and you don't want to waste that. So now what we're going to do is we'll take this over and test fit it on the bolts. I'm going to notch this so this will kind of fold up out of the way, kind of like I'm going to do the steel. And we'll test fit it. If it works, we're golden. Then we just kind of do fine trimming, get everything exactly where we want it. Then we can transfer this over to our steel, and it just takes a whole lot less farting around, right? So let me get that trimmed, get that folded up. We'll go test fit it, and we'll bring it over here and start making this for real. All right, guys. I got this jiggle wiggle down on here. I don't want to get it down too deep until I can do some more fine trimming on it, but essentially, this section here is the piece I'm going to have to bend back to meet the angle of this bracket, which is going to be right around there for the rest of this linkage, but it's lining up here and there. And obviously this bracket is going to be made out of the steel, but it gets us this here essentially just gets us a bracket, gets us a bridge to get all this to connect, be functional, and be safe and sturdy. And then we'll put a provision in back here to hold the actual throttle cable, which will sit up here, connect into the hardware that goes here. You see what I'm saying though? So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and get this one final trimmed and start getting it made out of the steel, and see if we can get this connected and get this all working with the old gas pedal instead of by hand. So all right, let's get to making this bracket. All right, guys, here's our basic shape to start. See if I can do this and hold the camera. So essentially right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and punch these two holes out here and here. So I got a reference point to work from. And then I'll get this cut back for this bend. And then obviously we're going to have to do some, you know, flat disking, some grinding to get all these shapes to where they're going to need to be to fit, you know, flawlessly. we want this to slide in and out nice, right? We don't want to just wedge it down there and tear up threads and all kinds of jazz. So we want it to be able to work right. So we're gonna have some finagling and some finessing to do. As soon as I get that to where it'll be on and off real easy, I'll touch back in with you, and then we'll get started working on this bend. We're probably gonna have to take a torch, heat it up, get the angle right, get it all done, then re-quench it, try to get the hardness back, and then we'll go from there. So let's keep going. All right, guys, got a little bit of an update for you. I went ahead and switched over metals. I had a small piece of nice aluminum, so I'm gonna give it a shot. I think it's gonna look a lot nicer with the car. We'll polish it all up to make it look like the engine. But anyway, as you can see, I got my 2 main bolt holes for the blower, and then my 2 holes for that bracket that I showed you earlier. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just working this down, taking off material a little bit at a time and laying it up on the blower, getting a measurement, trimming a little more down, laying it up on the blower, and just working it down. And once I get it to where it'll fit perfect, we'll trim it up real nice, polish it, and set it on there with the bracket. But anyway, let me finish grinding a little bit more, and we'll keep going. All right, guys, here we go. So it's like the first, just rough fit. So she's down all the way on both blower bolts. So obviously this is rough, so we got to polish it and clean it up yet. But anyway, so I guess what we're going to do now is get this bracket mounted so we can kind of see how it looks. Let me go get it. I've laid it down. All right, here it is. So essentially, like I said earlier, what we want is for this to stand straight up and down to line up with our linkage here. So we are, seems like everything stood up. We are super close. I know it don't look like it on camera, but I think what I'm gonna have to do is trim a little bit of this plate off in the front. Try to get that to tilt down a little bit more. And then essentially this will go like so and hook right up to our linkage, which is going to be awesome. So give me a minute to get this mounted on here. We'll trim this, get this mounted on with some true bolts, get everything set in place, and then we'll kind of see where we fall. All right, guys, this initial fit turned out killer. I'm not going to lie to you. Let me spin you around, show you what we got. All right, so here's the initial fit. Nothing's bolted down to the blower yet, but here's our bracket. Here's our linkage. And once this is bolted down, it's going to pull this up flush, and we're going to be good to go there. Now, the next issue we got to tackle is we got to put a provision up here for the actual linkage, right? So I need to get a provision made for right here to hold the linkage cable in place. So when we stomp on the old accelerator pedal, it'll pull this linkage, pull this down, run the carburetors, and set. So I'm going to take this back off, take it back apart, make a provision here to hold the cable itself. Then we'll clean everything up, polish it, bolt everything down, and see what happens. All right, guys, I got all of this hooked up now. So we are fully operational. I don't have everything bolted down, but you'll kind of get the gist of it here in a second. Let me back you up. So we are good to go. So we're set up there. Now, like I said a minute ago, we got to make a provision here for the throttle cable. So any of you Mopar people know what this is. This is just your stock bracket for your throttle cable. And this is where it goes right here. So what I've done is I've heated it up and I've bent this around. Let me spin it around here. So I've bent this around at a 90-degree angle versus like the 45-degree angle on the other side. So I think what I'm going to do is I only need this section right here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hack it off right here, round this out, wire wheel it, make it all look nice to match the rest of it, and then mount it or build something here to where this will all work together. So let me get over here, cut this off, clean it up. I'll touch back with you in a minute. If I can get this mounted and get this set up to where it all works right, then we've got to get up here and figure out this nightmare now. And now I've got to get the blower hat to work in unison with the rest of the linkage, which is going to be interesting. So we'll just keep going. All right, guys, so here's half of the old bracket that I just showed you a minute ago. So it's kind of facing like this. Here's the lock washer portion, or the lockdown for the cable itself. Here's the nut. And then here is the piece after I cut it off and done some magic with it. So I've got everything rounded off nice, cleaned up. Well, cleaned up as best as it could anyway. So what we'll probably do is once we get this all mounted, we'll clear it, get it cleaned up as best as we can. So now I think what I got to do is I'm going to have to bend this section down and get it at a true 90. And then we'll take it over here. Excuse my fat fingers. And I think we're going to mount it like ish right there, which should line up pretty decent. We'll get it figured out here in a minute. But then this bracket essentially, with the exception to clean up, final mount, final adjustments on all this jazz, we'll be good to go. All right, guys, I got this section done. I'll spin you around and show you what we got. And then we've got to actually try to figure out how to link in this hat. So let me spin you around and show you where we're at real quick. All right, so you remember that bracket that I had cut, I was gonna put here. Well, after some sitting down and thinking for 8 seconds, I was like, I wonder if it'll bolt to the blower. So where I had the original 90-degree bend, I heated that up and straightened it back out. We re-quenched it so it would have its hardness to the steel. And look at this action. Perfect line right in with our linkage to the carburetors. I mean, it worked out flawlessly. So if anybody's watching this back and you're trying to build something for a Mopar, go get your old bracket. Rewatch what I did, and man, it's boom, dead. I mean, it's dead nuts. So we've got everything hooked up. I mean, I've got some fine adjustments I got to make, tightening things up a little bit, but it's not that big a deal. So here we go. Let me find my gas pedal. There we go. We are set. Let me get on in there a little bit closer. But we are in there like swimwear, man. Cannot complain about that at all. So now, the next thing we got to do is we've got to link all of this in with that. Now, they do not make a direct kit for this. They give you a kit. Or I'm sorry, they sell you a kit. Nobody gives you nothing. It's like 230 bucks shipped. And it is also universal. And in the instructions, like when you buy this, it does say, could be complicated, tricky to make work. I mean, they tell you straight up front, like, have fun. Let me find it here. I've got it. Well, I've said it somewhere. It's hell getting old. Oh, here it is. So here's the kit. It is $193.40 shipped. And I think, oh yeah, here it is. Tricky to install. And all it is, I haven't opened it all the way up yet. For 200 bucks, you get this right here. That's it. So I guess we're going to go have fun for a little bit. I'm not sure if these constructions tell you anything, but hey, let's find out. I'll be back with you in a minute. All right, guys, cool. We got all the linkage done as far as I'm going to do it for now. I'm assuming this piece here was the tricky part they were talking about, because this part that holds the cable, there was no provision or part for it for here in the top of the hat. So just ran it down, got it tied into the plate that we built when we first started the video. Show you there, on over, so on and so forth. You guys seen, you know, essentially what we had done, but everything is good and tied in. So we'll get this all back apart and kind of cleaned up a little bit, but that's good to go. So let me see if I can get everything in one shot here, but get my mitts in there. But yeah, we're good to go. So cool. All right, so we're gonna get this stuff cleaned up here. Girls will be down here in a few minutes, and we are gonna get Homer over here on the rack and get ready to get the underneath cleaned up, run the fuel lines, transmission, torque converter, trans cooler, all of that jazz, and get it inside Homer. So we'll be back with you here in a few minutes. All right, guys, we got Homer on the lift. We're getting ready to start his transmission, drive shaft, torque converter, fuel lines, all that jazz over there. The girls come down, help me get Homer up on there because, you know, obviously he doesn't move or have brakes or anything. So anyway, that's going to be the end of this episode. I appreciate you watching. If you made it through that boring entire video, I greatly appreciate it. But someone might be able to use that if they want to customize linkage for Mopar or any other car. But anyway, Homer and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.